Dylan Carter had always been the kind of kid who could handle almost anything. Spiders in the basement, loud thunderstorms at night, even speaking in front of his class without shaking. But there was one single thing, that could turn his face pale and make his heart race faster than a sprint up the stairs: the dentist. It wasn't that he had ever had a terrible experience before. In fact, the last time he had gone, he had been too young to remember much more than a bright light overhead and a sticker he got afterward. But the stories he heard from friends at school, stories filled with wild exaggerations and dramatic sound effects, had planted a deep fear inside him. Every time someone said, "dentist," Dylan imagined loud drills echoing like giant machines, needles the size of pencils, and dentists who pressed too hard on teeth just to see how much a kid could take. None of it was true, of course, but fear doesn't need truth to grow. It only needs imagination. And Dylan had a very strong imagination. One Monday morning, his mom reminded him that his dental appointment was coming up in a week. Instantly, his stomach twisted into a tight knot. He tried to smile, but the corners of his mouth barely moved. All day at school, he couldn't focus. His teachers asked him simple questions, but his brain was busy picturing scary dentist tools. His lunch sat untouched. Every sound, a pencil dropping, the bell ringing, made him jump like he was already sitting in the dental chair. When he got home, he ran straight to his room and sat on the edge of his bed, trying to convince himself that everything would be fine. But the more he tried, the worse it felt. He even looked up what dentists do online, hoping for comfort, but instead he found diagrams of teeth, photos of tools, and long explanations filled with words he didn't understand. His fear only grew stronger. At dinner, his parents noticed he was unusually quiet. He poked at his food instead of eating it. "You're thinking about the dentist, aren't you?" his dad finally asked. Dylan froze. His fork fell onto his plate. He didn't want to admit it, but he didn't have to. His face already did. His mom leaned closer and spoke gently. "Dylan, it's okay to be scared, but you know dentists help people. They keep your teeth healthy." But Dylan didn't feel reassured. Something inside him whispered, "What if something goes wrong?" That night, he barely slept. The ticking of the clock became louder, like it was counting down the days until his appointment. He tossed and turned, pulling the blanket up to his chin, wishing he could magically skip next week entirely. By morning, he felt tired, frustrated, and even more afraid. Days passed slowly. Each morning brought him closer to the appointment, and each night brought more worry. His stomach felt tight all the time. He avoided talking about it at school. When a classmate mentioned braces, he practically jumped out of his seat. But then something unusual happened. On Friday, Dylan overheard a boy from another class talking about how he had just gotten a filling at the dentist. Dylan expected him to describe pain, horror, and all the things he feared, but the boy didn't. Instead, he said, "It wasn't bad at all. I thought it would hurt, but it really didn't." That sentence stuck with Dylan like glue. It replayed in his mind again and again throughout the day. If it didn't hurt for him, maybe it won't hurt for me either. It wasn't enough to erase all his fear, but it was enough to plant a tiny seed of hope, small, quiet, and almost invisible, but still there. And sometimes, that's all courage needs to begin growing. All weekend long, Dylan Carter kept thinking about that boy's words, the simple sentence that had surprised him more than anything: "It wasn't bad at all." He replayed it in his head during breakfast, while brushing his teeth, even while playing video games. The idea that someone his age had gone through something he feared, and survived it without pain, felt almost unreal. But every time he remembered it, a small spark inside him flickered, like someone had opened a tiny window in a dark room. Still, Monday arrived with a heaviness he couldn't shake. It was the day before his dental appointment. Every time he looked at the clock, he imagined the numbers counting down to the moment he would sit in that big chair under a bright white light. At school, he couldn't stop tapping his foot under his desk. His teacher asked if he felt okay, and he nodded quickly, even though he didn't feel okay at all. During recess, he sat alone on the bench, staring at the kids running around the playground. He wished he could just run away like that, from the fear, from the appointment, from everything. But running away wouldn't stop time. When he got home in the afternoon, his mom noticed he looked pale. "Dylan," she said softly, "do you want to talk about tomorrow?" For a moment, he thought about saying no, about pretending he was fine. But the fear had been sitting in his chest for too long, growing heavier each day, and he finally whispered, "I'm scared." His mom sat down beside him and put a warm hand on his shoulder. "Everyone gets scared," she said. "Even adults. The important thing isn't to never feel afraid, it's to do the right thing even when you are." Dylan listened quietly. Something about the way she said it made his fear feel a little less like a giant monster and a little more like something he might actually be able to deal with. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, but for the first time in days, his thoughts weren't completely terrifying. Mixed in with the worry were questions, hopeful ones. What if the dentist was actually nice? What if the tools weren't as bad as he imagined? What if the appointment ended faster than he thought? The tiny spark of courage inside him grew just enough to let him sleep. When morning came, he expected to wake up shaking with fear, but instead he felt strangely calm, like his mind had gotten tired of being scared. That didn't mean he wasn't nervous. He definitely was, but the panic didn't feel as loud. He ate breakfast slowly, checking the clock every few minutes. The appointment was at 10 a.m. As the time got closer, his stomach twisted a little, but he kept remembering that boy. It wasn't bad at all. Finally, his mom grabbed her keys and said, "Ready." Dylan swallowed hard. The word "ready" felt way too big, but he nodded anyway. The car ride felt like a roller coaster going up the first big hill. His mind kept switching between worry and courage and worry, back and forth like a ping-pong match. He stared out the car window at the passing houses, the trees, the sidewalk. Everything looked so normal, but his heart was beating like he was going into battle. When they pulled into the dental office parking lot, Dylan felt the fear rush back all at once. His palms got sweaty. His knees felt weak. But then another feeling pushed through, the realization that he had made it this far. He was here. He hadn't run away. He hadn't hidden in his room or begged to stay home. Something inside him whispered, "Maybe I really can do this." As he stepped out of the car, his legs wobbled a little, but he kept moving. Step by step, breath by breath. The automatic doors opened, and he walked inside. And even though his heart was pounding, Dylan Carter had taken the bravest step of his life. The moment Dylan stepped into the dental office, he expected the worst. Loud buzzing sounds, scary metal tools everywhere, maybe even kids crying in the waiting room. But instead, he heard soft music playing from hidden speakers, something calm and gentle that reminded him of sitting by a window during a quiet rainy day. The air smelled faintly like mint, not chemicals or medicine. The waiting room had colorful posters on the walls, comfortable chairs, and even a small table with puzzles and magazines. It looked nothing like the terrifying place he had imagined. Still, his heart pounded hard as he checked in at the front desk with his mom. The receptionist greeted him with a warm smile, like she already knew he was nervous and wanted him to feel safe. "Hi, Dylan. We'll be with you soon," she said cheerfully. Her voice was so normal, so friendly, that it made him blink in surprise. He sat down next to his mom and tried not to bounce his leg, but it was impossible. His knee felt like it had a motor inside it. He glanced at the clock on the wall and watched the seconds tick by. Every movement of the clock's hand made his stomach twist a little more. Then he heard it. "Dylan Carter?" His whole body froze. This was it. The moment he had been dreading. He stood up slowly, feeling like he was walking through thick mud. The dental assistant, a woman with kind eyes and bright pink sneakers, smiled at him. "Hey there, Dylan. Come on back with me. I'll explain everything we do today, okay?" That one sentence made his fear lighten just a bit. She wasn't rushing him. She wasn't acting annoyed. She seemed patient, and that mattered more than he expected. As he followed her down the hallway, he peeked into other rooms. He saw kids sitting in chairs, talking, laughing. He didn't see anyone panicking or crying. In one room, a little girl was getting her teeth cleaned while watching cartoons on a screen attached to the ceiling. Everything looked calm, normal, safe. When they reached his room, he stared at the dentist's chair like it was a giant creature waiting to swallow him. It looked bigger than he remembered, wide, shiny, and covered in smooth vinyl. The assistant noticed his hesitation and said gently, "You can sit however you want for now. We aren't doing anything yet." Dylan nodded and climbed into the chair. It wasn't bad. It was actually really soft. His feet dangled above the floor, and he gripped the armrests tightly at first, but after a minute he loosened his fingers. The assistant clipped a light blue bib around his neck. "Just to keep your shirt clean," she explained. Then she pointed to the tools on the tray. "These are just for cleaning. Nothing sharp, nothing that hurts. I promise." Dylan leaned forward a little, examining them. They looked much less scary up close than they did in the pictures he'd seen online. "Do they make noise?" he asked quietly. "Some of them do," she admitted, "but I'll show you what each one sounds like before we use it. No surprises. No surprises." That was exactly what he needed to hear. A few minutes later, the dentist walked in, a tall man with glasses who looked more like a friendly science teacher than a dentist. "Hey, Dylan. I've heard you're here for a checkup. How are you feeling?" Dylan shrugged awkwardly. "Nervous," he whispered. "Totally normal," the dentist said with a smile. "Most kids are. But my job is to make sure you're comfortable the entire time. Nothing happens without us explaining it first." Dylan felt warmth rise in his chest. Not fear this time, but relief. The dentist lowered the chair slowly, checking with him every few seconds. "You okay?" "Yeah, I think so," Dylan said. When the bright light turned on above him, he expected panic. But instead, he found himself breathing steadily. The chair wasn't swallowing him. No pain was happening. Everything was calm. And as he stared up at the ceiling, Dylan realized something huge. He wasn't running away. He was facing the very thing he thought he could never handle. And he was still okay. Dylan lay in the dentist's chair, staring up at the bright light above him, waiting for the moment everything would suddenly become terrifying. He expected his heartbeat to explode in his chest, his hands to shake uncontrollably, or his breath to catch in his throat. But instead, something unexpected happened. Nothing. Nothing bad, nothing painful, nothing frightening. The dentist adjusted the light slightly, making sure it wasn't shining directly into Dylan's eyes, and then said with a calm, cheerful tone, "All right, buddy. First thing we're going to do is take a look at your teeth. No tools yet, just a quick check." His voice sounded steady and reassuring, like someone who had done this 1,000 times and never rushed. The dental assistant stood beside him, handing the dentist a small mirror. Dylan felt his muscles tense for half a second, but then he noticed the mirror wasn't sharp at all. It just looked like a tiny spoon with a handle. The dentist used it gently, barely touching Dylan's teeth. "You're doing great," he said. "Everything looks good so far." That simple praise felt like a warm burst of confidence inside Dylan's chest. He didn't expect to feel proud in a place like this, but he did. He relaxed a bit more, letting his shoulders sink into the chair. "Next," the dentist said, "okay, now we're going to use a scaler to clean around your teeth. I'll show you what it sounds like." The assistant held up the tool and pressed a button, letting it buzz softly in the air. The noise wasn't loud or scary. It was more like the gentle hum of an electric toothbrush. Dylan blinked in surprise. "That's it," he thought. All the dramatic stories he had heard at school made it sound like a roaring machine. But this was nothing. "Ready to try it?" the dentist asked. For the first time since entering the office, Dylan didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I think so," he said. The dentist worked carefully, explaining each step before doing anything. "You might feel a little tickling, maybe a cold sensation. If anything bothers you, just raise your hand." Dylan nodded. The moment the tool touched his teeth, he braced himself, expecting a jolt of pain, but what he actually felt was almost nothing. Just a vibration, light and strange, but not painful at all. His eyes widened with surprise. This wasn't scary. This was manageable. This was easy. The dentist paused. "You okay?" Dylan nodded quickly. "It doesn't hurt." "Told you it wouldn't," the dentist said with a grin. As the cleaning continued, Dylan felt waves of relief wash over him. All the imaginary scenarios that had kept him awake for nights suddenly seemed silly. The machine noises weren't loud. The tools weren't sharp. The dentist wasn't scary. Nothing was like he imagined. When the dentist switched to polishing, the tool made a soft whirring sound that reminded Dylan of a tiny spinning toy. The assistant handed him a cotton-flavored rinse and joked, "Minty fresh superpowers." Dylan even laughed, a real laugh, in a dentist office. When the cleaning was done, the dentist said proudly, "You handled that like a champ." Something inside Dylan swelled with pride. He couldn't believe it. He had actually done it. The dentist then pulled up the X-rays on a screen, pointing out healthy teeth and explaining how well Dylan had been brushing. "No cavities today," he said. "You're doing a great job." Dylan's mom, watching from the corner, smiled proudly. Dylan felt taller somehow, even though he was still lying in the chair. The part he had feared the most, the part he thought would be horrible, had already happened, and he hadn't even realized it. He had faced it head-on, and nothing bad had happened. As the dentist raised the chair back up, Dylan sat up slowly, feeling lighter than he had in days. He wasn't just relieved, he was proud. Truly proud. Because he hadn't just survived the appointment. He had defeated the fear that controlled him for so long. And that victory felt bigger than anything he had imagined. When Dylan stepped out of the dentist's room and back into the hallway, he almost couldn't believe what had just happened. For days he had imagined himself shaking, panicking, maybe even crying, but now he walked with steady steps, feeling strangely calm and more confident than he had in a long time. His mom handed him his hoodie, but he didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like his fear, the giant, heavy fear that had followed him around all week, had simply melted away somewhere between the dentist's explanation and that gentle buzzing tool. As they reached the front desk, the receptionist smiled at him. "All done, Dylan? How'd it go?" Dylan paused for a moment, thinking about how to answer. A few hours ago, he would have said something like, "terrifying," but now he found himself grinning. "It was actually easy." His mom chuckled softly, brushing a hand over his hair. "See? Nothing to worry about." But Dylan shook his head. "I mean, I was scared. Really scared. But it wasn't bad at all." The receptionist gave him a high five before handing him a small goodie bag with a toothbrush, toothpaste, and a sticker that said "Brave Patient." He held it proudly, feeling like he'd earned a medal. As they walked out to the car, the sunlight felt brighter, warmer. He took a deep breath of fresh air, and for the first time in a week, his chest didn't feel tight. Instead, he felt light, almost excited. It wasn't just because the appointment was over, it was because he had done something he didn't think he could do. He had faced a fear that once felt too big to handle. When they got into the car, his mom asked, "So, what was the hardest part?" Dylan thought for a moment. Honestly, thinking about it. Not the appointment, just imagining it. That realization hit him like a soft but powerful wave. The fear he had felt hadn't come from the dentist at all. It had come from the stories he heard, the things he pictured, and the worries he let grow larger and larger in his head. The appointment itself had been simple compared to that. As they drove home, Dylan looked out the window, replaying everything in his mind. The friendly assistant. The calm dentist. The tools that didn't hurt at all. The way he had breathed deeply and told himself he could handle it. He realized something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was being afraid but still choosing to walk forward anyway. Later that day, when his dad came home from work, Dylan greeted him at the door. "How did it go?" his dad asked, expecting a long dramatic story. But Dylan lifted his chin and said proudly, "I did it. And it was totally fine." His dad smiled, impressed. "That's my guy." At dinner, Dylan told the whole story, how nervous he had been, how he thought the tools would be scary, and how surprised he was when nothing hurt. His parents listened with big smiles, nodding as he talked faster and faster with excitement. After dinner, Dylan went to his room and grabbed his phone. He opened the group chat with his friends, some of whom had once helped fuel his fear with exaggerated stories. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he typed, "Guys, the dentist isn't scary at all. I was nervous, but it didn't hurt. Not even a little." He hit send and felt a warm sense of pride spreading through him. Maybe, just maybe, his story would help someone else who was scared, just like that one boy's story had helped him. When he went to bed that night, he lay under the covers feeling peaceful. No twisting stomach. No racing heart. Just a quiet, steady confidence. He had faced something that once felt impossible, and because of that, he felt stronger than before. The fear that once controlled him had lost its power. And Dylan knew that the next time he faced something scary, whether it was a dentist appointment, a school presentation, or anything else, He could look back at this moment and remind himself of a simple truth. Fear doesn't last forever. But courage does.